The burning sun hung over Mesa Valley like a merciless torch, turning every grain of dust into a shimmering ember as the wind drifted lazily across the wide-open plains. Rancher Colton Hayes had been riding the northern fence line for hours, the same route he had taken every single afternoon for the past 8 years, but today, something felt wrong. A faint movement, barely noticeable, caught the corner of his eye far off near the dry creek. At first he thought it was a coyote dragging itself across the dirt, wounded or starving, but as he narrowed his eyes and rode closer, his heart suddenly jolted. It wasn't an animal. It was a woman. A young woman, barely clothed, wrapped in torn fabric like a sheet ripped from a cabin bed, her skin bruised, her body shaking, streaks of blood dried across her arms, back, and legs. Her hair was tangled with dirt, and her bare feet were scraped raw from running. Colton's horse slowed on its own, sensing the tension in its rider. Colton dismounted with a stiff, careful movement, his boots crunching across the brittle grass. The woman heard him and flinched violently, turning her head just enough that their eyes met. Hers were wide, wild, like an animal cornered in a trap. "Please, don't," she whispered, breath catching as she tried to scramble backward but her limbs collapsed under her. "I'm begging you, please," her voice cracked into a sound so fragile and broken that Colton felt it slice right through his ribs. He lifted both hands gently, palms open, keeping his voice low and steady. "Ma'am. I ain't here to hurt you. I swear on my life." But she trembled harder, her shoulders pulling inward as though she expected another blow at any second. Colton's chest tightened. Whatever had happened to her, it wasn't just bad. It was monstrous. He knelt down slowly, placing himself lower than her so he wouldn't seem like a threat. "Name's Colton Hayes. I run the Hayes Ranch just past that ridge." She stared at him as though listening to each word but trusting none. Her lips quivered. They said they'd come back. They said if I screamed, if I ran, they'd, her voice dissolved into shaky breaths. Colton swallowed the rage rising inside him. Every bruise on her body screamed the truth, this was no accident, no fall, no misstep. Somebody had done this to her. Somebody cruel. Somebody still out there. He took off his trail coat, the heavy brown one he used for cold nights, and gently laid it across her shoulders. She gasped and jerked as it touched her skin, but after a second, she clutched it tightly around herself, pulling it like a shield. Her entire body was trembling so violently that even Colton began to shake, not from fear, but from the sheer helpless fury boiling in his veins. He had seen bad things before. The West was full of them. But this was different. This was the kind of evil that made a man question the world he lived in. "You're safe now," he murmured, even though he wasn't fully sure it was true. Not yet. Not until he knew who had left her here to die. Her breathing grew uneven again as she looked around the open land, scanning the distance like she expected shadows to rise from the horizon. "They tied me to a post, they laughed when I begged." Colton felt something snap inside him. He forced himself to stay calm for her sake, but his hands were shaking now despite his effort to hide it. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer for a long moment. Then, barely audible, "Lena." Colton nodded softly. "Lena, I'm getting you out of here. But I need to pick you up." "All right." She flinched again, clutching the coat tighter. Please don't hurt me," he shook his head hard. "Never. I'll die before I lay a hand on you in harm. I give you my word." That word, rancher's word, meant something in the West. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her dirty cheeks. Colton slid one arm under her knees and one behind her back, slow as sunrise. She whimpered as his hands brushed the bruises along her ribs. "I'm sorry," he whispered, steadying her. "I know it hurts." When he lifted her, she weighed almost nothing. She was shaking so violently now that she could barely keep her head up. Her face pressed weakly against his chest as he carried her toward the horse. Don't leave me," she cried in a hoarse whisper. "I ain't going anywhere," he said firmly. "Not now. Not ever, till you're safe." He mounted the horse with her held securely, settling her in front of him while wrapping an arm around her to keep her steady. She continued to tremble, and every jolt of fear that ran through her body seemed to run straight into his. Colton wasn't a man who scared easily. He'd fought rustlers, outlaws, and storms that tore barns apart, but the thought of what had been done to Lena, that shook him in a way he didn't expect. He turned the horse toward his ranch, tapping its sides. As they rode, Lena's voice cracked again. "They'll come for me, they always come." Colton pulled her closer, his voice low but burning with a promise forged from steel. "Then they'll have to go through me." She tried to look up at him, eyes full of terror and disbelief. Why would you help me? You don't even know me." He looked ahead at the long stretch of land, jaw clenched, fury simmering. "Because no decent human deserves what was done to you. And because someone's gotta stand between you and the monsters." As the ranch came into view, Colton could feel her exhaustion. Her head leaned fully against him, and her breathing slowed, as if her body had finally realized it could let go, even if just a little. But Colton's shaking hadn't stopped. He kept thinking about the tracks he'd seen near the creek. Boot prints. Several of them. Fresh. They hadn't gone far. And they sure as hell hadn't finished what they planned. Someone had left Lena to die in the dirt, and that someone was still out there. Watching. Waiting. And Colton Hayes knew one thing for certain: this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far darker. Something he could no longer walk away from. "You're safe now, Lena," he whispered again, but the words felt like a challenge thrown into the wind. Because he could swear, the valley itself seemed to be holding its breath. Colton Hayes carried Lena into the ranch house with the same care a man would use to hold a wounded bird whose wings had been shattered by storms. Inside, the wooden walls were warm, lit by the glow of a single lantern. He lowered her gently onto the spare bed, pulling a clean quilt over her trembling body. She winced as the fabric brushed her bruises, and Colton's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. He had seen outlaws do terrible things: steal cattle, burn barns, threaten homesteads, but he had never seen a human soul destroyed the way Lena's had been. Her eyes could barely focus. Every time a floorboard creaked, she flinched violently as if expecting a fist to strike or a boot to kick. "You're safe," he whispered again, though the storm brewing inside him made the words feel like smoke. He brought her water, cleaned her wounds as gently as he could, and when he hesitated, when his hands trembled so badly he couldn't hold the cloth straight, Lena touched his wrist weakly. "Why are you shaking?" she whispered. He didn't answer, because the truth was too heavy. He was shaking from rage. From the kind of fury that changes a man at the bone. When she finally drifted into fitful sleep, Colton rose silently and walked to the front porch, the boards creaking under his boots. The night had fallen hard and black, stretching across the plains like a shroud. The stars were sharp. The wind was colder. And the horse tracks he'd seen earlier were still out there. Fresh. Leading northeast. Whoever hurt Lena had walked away believing they'd broken her completely. Believing she had no one. Believing no man alive would come for them. They were wrong. Colton saddled his horse without shaking a stirrup. He strapped on his revolver and rifle, tightening the leather until it creaked like old bones. Then he went back inside just to look at Lena one more time. Her breathing was shallow, her hair tangled on the pillow, her body curled like she was still trying to protect herself from invisible blows. "I'll be back," he whispered. "And I swear to you, I won't come back alone." He didn't know if she heard him. He didn't know if she could. But he left anyway, because the night demanded it. The tracks led him deeper into the valley where jagged cliffs rose on either side like the ribs of some ancient giant. The riders ahead had camped near the rocks, the glowing embers of a dying fire flickered from a distance. Colton dismounted, strapped the reins to a branch, and moved forward quietly through the darkness. Voices carried across the wind, low, mocking, laughing. "Girl didn't last long," one man said. "Too soft." "Should have finished her," another replied. "Ain't no way she made it far." Colton's pulse became a slow, controlled drumbeat. He stepped around the last boulder and saw them, 3 men, dirty, armed, smug with the kind of confidence that came from thinking consequences didn't exist. Colton didn't draw his gun immediately. He stepped into the firelight with deliberate calm. "Evenin'," he said. All 3 froze. Their smirks vanished. The tallest one reached for his holster, but Colton's rifle was already raised. "Don't," Colton said, voice deep, steady, terrifyingly calm. "You move a finger faster than the wind, and you die tonight." The leader sneered. "Who the hell are you?" Colton didn't answer that. Where's the rope you tied her with? The men laughed. That girl. She's probably buzzard food by now. That was the last sentence the man ever spoke with all his teeth. Colton hit him so hard the crack echoed off the canyon walls. A fight erupted instantly, a brutal, chaotic brawl under the moonlight. One outlaw lunged with a knife, Colton twisted, slammed him into the rocks, felt the blade graze his ribs but didn't stop. The third fired a shot that sparked off stone inches from Colton's boot. Colton dove, rolled, grabbed his revolver, and fired once, clean, controlled. The outlaw dropped. The second man came at him again, wild with fear, but Colton grabbed him by the collar and slammed him onto the dirt. She begged you, Colton growled, his voice shaking with fury. She begged, and you laughed. The men whimpered. We didn't mean to. Colton's fist crashed into his jaw. The men went limp. Only the leader was left, crawling backward, terrified now, his earlier arrogance shattered. Please, don't, the men whispered. I'm begging you. Those words hit Colton like a hammer, the same words Lena had said, the same helpless cry. Colton stood over him, shaking, not in fear, not in hesitation, but from the overwhelming rage that nearly drowned him. For a long moment, the night held its breath. Then Colton holstered his gun. You're going to jail, he said. All of you. And if she doesn't survive? God help you. He tied them with the same rope they used on Lena and dragged them back across the valley toward town. When he returned to the ranch hours later, the sky was glowing with the pale light of dawn. Colton pushed the door open, exhausted, dust-covered, blood on his shirt not his own. Lena stirred, eyes opening slowly. Fear flickered, until she saw it was him. Colton sat on the edge of the bed. They won't be hurting anyone again, he said softly. For the first time, Lena didn't flinch. A small, broken breath escaped her, like a sigh of relief she'd held in for too long. Why, she whispered. Why would you go that far for me? Colton hesitated. He wasn't a man who explained himself often. Because what happened to you was evil. And this land's full of evil men, unless someone stands up. Her eyes filled with tears. Not fear this time. Something else. Thank you. Colton. She reached for his hand, fingers trembling. He took it gently. You ain't alone anymore, he said. Her grip tightened. And for the first time since he found her, her body stopped shaking. Outside, the sun rose over Mesa Valley, washing the world in gold, as if the land itself was relieved justice had finally found its way through the darkness. And though the road ahead for Lena would be long and painful, one truth settled deep in her heart: she had been saved by a man who didn't owe her a single thing, but gave her everything anyway. And Colton Hayes, once a quiet rancher living a simple life, knew his world would never be the same again. Not after the night he chose to fight the monsters. And for everyone watching this story, your support is what keeps these powerful Wild West tales alive. So hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share it with someone who loves emotional, unforgettable stories.